Resuming debate, the Honourable Minister for Emergency Management and Community Resilience.
Mr. Speaker, I will be sharing my time with the Honourable Member for Indigenous Services. I want to begin by thanking the Honourable Member for Winnipeg Centre for bringing this important and timely debate forward. Like many Canadians, I've seen the devastating images coming out of Manitoba and Saskatchewan. Thick smoke, orange skies, whole communities forced to evacuate, families unsure whether they'll have homes to return to. It's frightening and it's heartbreaking. My thoughts are with everyone who's been displaced, who's worried about their homes, their health, their loved ones. These are difficult times and the uncertainty is real. Since the early stages of this crisis, I've been working closely with my provincial counterparts to manage the federal response and to make sure that help is reaching the people that need it most. Coordination between federal officials, the province, Indigenous communities, and humanitarian organizations is constant, and all partners are meeting every day to ensure that we are doing all that we can to keep people safe. I want to express my deep thanks to first responders, firefighters, volunteers, particularly the Canadian Armed Forces and Coast Guard, who stepped and placed themselves in danger themselves to protect others. Your commitment and your courage are extraordinary. I also want to recognize the leadership shown by Indigenous governments and local officials, particularly in remote communities, where evacuations are so complex, so difficult, and resources are so hard to access. This has been an incredibly challenging time, and the leadership on the ground has been essential. Mr. Speaker, I want to be clear. Our government acted swiftly when called upon. On May 28th, the Prime Minister spoke with Premier Wab Kinew. That same night, we approved 2 requests for federal assistance from the Government of Manitoba to help evacuate First Nations communities under threat. Canadian Armed Forces members were deployed immediately. They began assisting with evacuations the very next morning. I've heard the concerns raised by the Honourable Member for Winnipeg Centre. But again, I want to be clear, this was not a slow or a bureaucratic process. The requests from Manitoba came in late at night. They were approved immediately. This was one of the fastest federal responses in recent memory. By the next morning, Canadian Armed Forces personnel were on the ground already assisting with evacuations. This was a constantly evolving, and still is, emergency. In the case of the First Nations, with conditions changing on the ground by the hour. In places like Matthias Colum Cree Nation, the situation was especially urgent. I do understand the frustration and the fear that is surely felt by community members and leaders when fire conditions worsen and change. But I want to assure this House, we had contingencies at every step, as we always do. When the landing strip could not accommodate larger planes, we had to source smaller ones, and so the evacuation was necessarily slower. Large planes like Hercules could not land at that strip. If fixed-wing aircraft weren't an option because of smoke or weather, we could move people by helicopter. If helicopters weren't viable, we were looking at boats. Our objective was always the same: reach people quickly and safely, no matter the method. Resources from the Canadian Armed Forces were brought in from across the country, with the result being one of the largest air evacuation operations in Canadian history. At every stage, we worked in real time with our provincial and Indigenous partners to adjust our response to the ever-changing circumstances on the ground. The response wasn't just fast, it was well coordinated. I've been in regular contact with my provincial counterparts in Manitoba, in Saskatchewan, the provinces that were under immediate threat. And we've kept those lines of communication open and still do as the situation evolves. My conversations with Ministers Naylor and MacLeod were constructive and focused, and they all, to a person, expressed appreciation for the speed, clarity, and flexibility of the federal response. This is really what effective emergency management looks like. Governments at all levels working together to adapt, to act, and above all, to protect people. We're working with the Manitoba and Saskatchewan governments to bolster the support from Canadians who donate through the Red Cross by matching their donations dollar for dollar. And through this, we'll stand with Canadians and assist those impacted by the wildland fires through the Canadian Red Cross Wildlife Appeals. As Minister of Emergency Management and Community Resilience, I'm overseeing the federal response. So I work with the Government Operations Centre, and we coordinate efforts across departments like National Defence, when the armed forces are called out, Indigenous services, transport, and health, to make sure that we're providing the right support at the right time. This response is being coordinated day and night, around the clock. While Saskatchewan hasn't submitted a formal request for federal assistance yet, we're ready to respond the moment we're asked, and in fact, I've already had discussions with Minister MacLeod, my counterpart. I've also had discussions with Mike Ellis in Alberta before they even asked us to tell them that we're available for them the moment they need our help. In the meantime, Indigenous Services Canada has stepped in to support affected First Nations, and I'm working closely with my colleague, the Minister of Indigenous Services, to ensure that all communities have what they need. I want to thank her for her support and her very strong leadership during this difficult time. When the immediate threat has passed, we'll be there to help communities recover and build back, and that's where disaster financial assistance arrangements come in. It's a federal program that supports provinces and territories with the cost of responding to major disasters. It helps make sure that rebuilding can happen and that people aren't left to do it alone. Mr. Speaker, Canadians rightly expect that when disasters strike, every order of government will do its part, and that is exactly what we're doing. But let me say this as well. These kinds of moments should not become partisan flashpoints. They should be moments for unity, for standing together to support those on the front lines, to support those whose lives have been upended, and to support them with speed, with coordination, and with compassion. That includes listening to Indigenous communities who have told us clearly and repeatedly that they face unique and indeed disproportionate challenges during emergencies, especially when it comes to evacuations, overcrowded accommodations, access to culturally safe supports, and long-term recovery. We hear those concerns and we're acting on them. We know there's more to do. We're committed to doing that in partnership and in good faith. I assure you that in my role as Minister for Disaster Management and also Community Resilience, I'll be focused on ensuring that we learn from these disasters and we prepare better to respond and mitigate the very real threats that we face each year. I invite all members of this House to join me and our government in working on solutions to these important issues. To the people of Matthias Colum Cree Nation, Cross Lake, Lac L'Orange Indian Band, every other community affected by these fires, know that your government is here for you. We will continue to work around the clock to get you the help that you need. We'll be there as evacuations unfold. We'll be there as recovery begins. We'll be there in the following weeks and months. There's a long road ahead. We'll be walking it with you every single step of the way. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Prince Albert.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the presentation from the Minister. Minister, I live in the riding of Prince Albert. We're receiving some 7,000, 8,000 evacuees that could go up to 15,000 throughout the province of Saskatchewan. Lots of people are asking questions about how we're going to take care of these people and what types of resources are going to be available. The province of Saskatchewan has mentioned Red Cross is going to be there, and they're going to provide them $15 million of the funding to support the evacuees. So I have two questions. What would you recommend that the communities that are receiving evacuees do? And will the federal government consider something similar like we used to do for disasters around other parts of the world where people donate to the Red Cross, they would match those donations?
Before I go to the Minister, just a reminder to direct questions through the Speaker. The Minister of Emergency Management and Community Resilience.
So with respect to your question regarding evacuees, you can tell them that the federal government has their backs, that we will be there to support them, and that in fact Red Cross and other humanitarian task forces in these situations are on the ground assisting evacuees when there are difficulties with accessing accommodation. And, you know, I might add one other thing, that the problem with dealing with these wildfires at this point in time is that the evacuations have been rolling. So it's not like a situation where we're evacuating one community like Jasper. It's been one community, then another community, then another community, all rolling, and especially in the province of Manitoba, and I suspect it will happen in Saskatchewan too. That means an incredible strain on resources, and it's a continuous strain on resources. So, you know, all I can add to that is that we will continue to do all that we can because, again, the safety of Canadians, people from Saskatchewan, is our top priority.
Honourable Member for the Bay of Quinte.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as Canada's largest Air Force base, and with no fewer than 6 flying squadrons in its fold, 8 wing CFB Trenton in my riding of the Bay of Quinte is always at the forefront of our airborne military transport efforts around the world. But equally as important here at home in emergency assistance is to our citizens from coast to coast to coast. My question through you, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Emergency Management is, what plans does our government have to deploy assets from CFB Trenton in this pressing emergency? And is CFB Trenton being advised to stand by to receive evacuees from hard-hit areas of our north from the wildfires in its large cadet camp facility? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Emergency Management.
Thank you for the question. Thank you, Honourable Member from the Bay of Quinte. I can indeed advise that there were 2 squadrons from Trenton that were deployed. One with respect to the Matthias Colum evacuation, and the other with respect to the Cross Lake one. And I would, again, at this point in time, like to thank all of the forces members for helping evacuate members of those communities under very challenging, and as I've indicated before, unpredictable situations. And of course, we always have great gratitude for those individuals who risk their own lives to bring other people to safety. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Winnipeg Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for her comments. You know, she said that the government has done all they can. People disagree, including Chief Munias of Pachigamat Cree Nation, who has claimed that the Government of Canada has neglected its constitutional obligations to collaborate and consult in the evacuation process, often citing bureaucratic issues and jurisdictional disputes delaying processes. First Nations chiefs in Manitoba have also voiced that while the federal government could have immediately deployed the Canadian Armed Forces to assist with coordination, wellness checks, evacuation, logistics, and reception of evacuees in Winnipeg, they did not do so, costing nations time, resources, and peace of mind. Does the member opposite agree with me that this is the new normal, that the federal government needs to put in a permanent response to deal with the escalating climate crisis?
The Minister of Emergency Management, a brief response, please.
I thank the member for Winnipeg Centre for her question, and I can advise that indeed our department will be looking at all kinds of different mechanisms for dealing with responses to emergency situations like wildfires and floods. We're going to be doing that because we know that every time a crisis happens, sorry, Mr. Speaker, we learn. We learn from that crisis. We take lessons, and we take those lessons to our local and provincial and Indigenous counterparts, and we work to make a system that's better with respect to all aspects of emergency preparedness and evacuations. Thank you.
Thank you. Resuming debate, the Minister of Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to congratulate you on winning this seat and representing us as the Speaker in House.
Before I begin this evening, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that it's a privilege for me to rise for the first time in this House as member for Abitibi, Bay James, Nunavik, EU. I would like to sincerely thank the residents of my riding for allowing me to represent them in this House.
It is also an honor, Mr. Speaker, to rise as the first Minister of Indigenous Services who is herself Indigenous. A bold and historic move by our Prime Minister in the formation of his cabinet. I want to also acknowledge my colleagues from the Indigenous Caucus for coming to support this important debate tonight. I rise in this House with a deep sense of urgency and responsibility. Across Canada, wildfires are presently burning. They are threatening lives, homes, and entire communities. These fires are not isolated events. They are part of a growing pattern, yes, driven by climate change. And they are affecting more and more people, more frequently and more severely than ever before. I want to acknowledge that these profound impacts the wildfires have had on individuals, families, and communities. To those who've lost their homes, who've been forced to evacuate, and to those who are living with uncertainty and fear, I extend my deepest sympathies. I think of you. I want to also share that my ministry has been in close communication with many chiefs and First Nation leaders. We've been supporting these communities through these challenging times, working around the clock to keep people safe and securing them in an ever-changing situation. Sometimes I receive calls from leadership that have been in the front lines fighting fires themselves. I want to acknowledge their leadership and courage. To support their evacuations, Indigenous Services Canada has first ensured that we provide advance payments to First Nations communities. These funds help to ensure that communities have the resources that they need when they need them in critical moments. This approach is proactive. It is necessary. When communities are given the right tools and resources to act swiftly, lives are protected and damage is minimized. Mr. Speaker, we work alongside First Nations partners as well as provincial and territorial counterparts to monitor and to ensure that we respond rapidly to ever-evolving fire situations. I am in near constant communication with my federal colleagues, such as the Minister of Emergency Management and Community Resilience. We have spoken with our provincial counterparts over the last few days, and I want to commend the Minister for her support, open communication, and response to urgency when I called upon her at all hours of the night. I also want to acknowledge the many leaders who have spoken with me. Chief Wayland Scott is one of the chiefs that I had the opportunity to speak with recently and shared this quote as part of the debate this evening. Our nation has been evacuated for some time now due to wildfires in Northern Ontario. The Minister of Indigenous Services directed her team to reach out to me directly, and they have been available and supportive through this emergency. Chief Scott, Ontario Regional Chief Benedict, and other Ontario chiefs affected by the wildfires also met with the minister virtually. Our situations, our needs, and the best way to support our response was reflected in how her team, on numerous occasions, day and night, have responded to the community and the community members. During this crisis, the Government of Canada has been a strong partner for First Nations across Ontario. We are proactive in reaching out to all provinces. This partnership reflects our shared responsibility. No single government or organization can face this challenge alone. It is through unity and mutual respect that we find most effective solutions. The Emergency Management Assistance Program under Indigenous Services Canada also reimburses eligible costs related to wildfire response and recovery. This includes evacuation support and culturally sensitive services offered with wraparound on-site, taking into consideration mental health, traditional food, language interpretation, and childcare. I want to share that we have been delivering these in a collaborative way to ensure that we are reflecting and respecting the needs of First Nations. To ensure timely support, we have also provided advanced payments to on-reserve and eligible First Nation communities. This funding helps communities respond to the immediate need without waiting for reimbursement in a time of crisis. These upfront supports are a reflection of our commitment to uphold the dignity and well-being of every community member during a time of crisis. I spoke earlier today to Chief Bobby Cameron. I want to echo his statement. Federal and provincial governments need to work together to respond to First Nation emergencies, jointly and collaboratively. We have shown that we are open to that dialogue and that partnership. Mr. Speaker, we are also working to ensure that we are looking at long-term wildfire preparedness. Our Fire Smart program supports preparedness through firefighter training, fuel management, and vegetation clearing projects. The Non-Structural Mitigation and Preparedness program also helps develop and test emergency management plans and to build capacity to respond to future emergencies. Preparedness is key. These supports are about building strength before disaster strikes so that communities can mitigate the impact to the greatest extent possible. It's not only to ensure that they have the ability to respond, but that they also have the capacity to recover and thrive. We have started to support Indigenous nations in other provinces such as Alberta and Saskatchewan, calling them, ensuring that our dialogue is in place to respond to their emerging needs. Indigenous Service Canada has also taken steps to strengthen its approach. This includes implementing a new risk-based funding model, improving emergency management plans, and enhancing program indicators. A key part of this work is multilateral emergency management service agreements, agreements that recognize First Nations as full and equal partners alongside federal, provincial, and territorial governments. These agreements are not just administrative tools. They ensure that we are showcasing shared responsibility and culturally appropriate emergency services. The future of First Nations emergency management is at top of mind for me. As I take on this new role, it is an issue that has come up in many conversations that I've had with First Nations leaders over the past few days. I want to share another quote. Grand Chief Wilson of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, I want to acknowledge the Minister for listening to our concerns and establishing direct lines of communication. We are making progress and we understand there are gaps that need to be addressed. I look forward to working with the Minister to address these gaps. Mr. Speaker, we are also looking forward to the 2025 wildfire season to ensure that we are not waiting, we are preparing. This ministry dedicates annual funding to capacity, mitigation, preparedness in First Nations communities. This also includes support for emergency management coordinator positions, many that have showcased their skill and capacity over the past few days. We are laying the groundwork for a future where communities are not just reacting to emergencies, but also equipped to prevent them. The post-wildfire season will be met with a debrief with First Nation communities to focus on preparedness and the response and reaction. There is always room to improve. We want to ensure that it comes directly from First Nations. This is a new government with new opportunities. We will respond in a new way, focused on First Nations, Indigenous peoples, Inuit, and Métis. I want to assure that health and safety of all First Nations community members is the priority of this ministry. We are doing work to support in all capacities. Emergencies occur, and we want to support them in ensuring that they can restore their positions, bring their members home in a culturally safe way, and to avoid vulnerability and exploitation, and strengthen the resilience that they have as First Nations people. In closing, wildfires are devastating. They test the strength of First Nations communities and the bonds that hold us together. I want to acknowledge all entities that have supported this process, the Canadian Armed Forces, all volunteers, all other organizing resources that have supported First Nations in their evacuation, the time that they're spending away from their homes, and also those that will work with us to return them safely to their communities. Thank you, merci.
Questions et commentaires, questions and comments. The member for Prince Albert.
And I thank the minister for her comments here tonight. You know, the riding of Prince Albert, we've extended our hospitality to the member from Dessinippi, Mississippi, and Churchill, so that they will, if he needs an office to work out in Prince Albert, as some of his constituents are moving further south, that he has a place to work out of. I just want to make sure that the government of Canada has people in place to help and receive these people as they go through issues, maybe unemployment insurance, social services, whatever other items that may come across that they normally would get back in their riding. Now they're going to receive them in areas where they're displaced too. What have you put in place to actually accomplish that? And what other things do you think should be put in place at a local level to make sure these individuals are properly taken care of?
Before I allow the minister to respond, it's through the chair. I can't respond, but the minister can provide answer. The Minister of Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleague for this important question. We are not only supporting our members as they are outside of the community in evacuation centers, we are offering wraparound services, mental health, healthcare, working with First Nations bands and communities to support them in their administrative processes as they're not able to offer that service on community. Things such as ensuring payroll is carried out, responding to the needs of HR processes outside of the community. These are all critical aspects to support them in ensuring that they can continue working for their members, be it in a position of coordinating evacuation or ensuring that payments are made to members in this time of crisis. I also want to acknowledge that many First Nations communities have stepped up with their capacity and their expertise to support their fellow First Nation members and relations, bringing them into space to feel welcome, to feel communicated with, to ensure that it is done in a culturally safe way. We are looking to build that relationship beyond, outside the scope, inviting our partners, inviting government to work with us, collaborate with us. I want to thank my colleague for the question, and I look forward in asking all members of this chamber to support in this time of crisis.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. La députée pour...
The member for Pontiac. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to thank our minister for that speech, that very important speech here in the House. As you know, Mr. Speaker, in the Outaouais area, we experienced similar things with one of the First Nations in my riding that had to be evacuated. So it's very important. So I'd like to thank everyone who works at Indigenous Services Canada for their support. My question for the minister is, could she tell us a bit more of the details of the steps taken by the department to support First Nations affected by the fires in Manitoba? And particularly, I'd like to know more about the cultural support and temporary housing that's being provided to First Nations communities. The Honourable Minister.
Merci, Monsieur Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for that question. I think it's one of those times when we are seeing a number of communities that have made an offer to welcome people into their communities, and I'm very proud that there are a number of First Nations that have invited and opened their doors to take people in. I come from a nation where I had the same experience. There were a number of municipalities who have also opened their doors to take people in. It's a cooperative process to ensure that we're providing a fair and high-quality service to people who've been evacuated. And there are a number of partners that we're working with, not just emergency management, but also our partners. And I want to ensure that one of our priorities is to enhance the way we communicate. My team has, throughout this process, been in dialogue with a number of communities and people responsible for emergency response. We want to make sure that the way people leave their communities in times of crisis, we want to make sure that they're well received, and we want to show greater respect for cultural needs. And often we want to see people served in their language by their own people. Thank you.